I am probably the least superstitious tarot card reader you're ever going to meet.
The evolution of tarot reading, a lot of people put negative connotation on. I could take one of my employees here who has nothing to do with anything, and they could pull cards and legitimately produce a reading.
Absolutely.
So I am here today with Julia Gordon-Bramer. You're listed in St. Louis's top 10 psychics. You are also called St. Louis's #1 fortune teller by CBS, which is pretty cool. She is an ordained minister with the Universal Life Church, Ho'oponopono certified. You have appeared on MTV, Nickelodeon, and many television and radio shows, sharing your tarot talents and scholarship. And yesterday I did a reading with you. Actually, a couple days ago. I got to do a reading with you, and it was really interesting to see how practical you were and how you laid things out in a constructive way, not just like mystical, magical, hard to understand, can interpret it in 1,000 different ways. And
Right.
I think my first question for you is why do you need tarot cards to do a reading? Why can't you just channel the information without the cards present?
Yeah, maybe I can. Certainly I meet people and I feel things and I can have deep discussions. And I have a lot of clients who I'll talk to if I'm on a road trip or something and I'll be driving, and not using the cards. But in general, I think the cards are very useful because they're a picture of what's going on, and so my clients can see that, and they are kind of co-interpreting with me. So, we use the cards as a jumping off point, basically.
Yeah, I guess my question also kind of simplified is that if you didn't have the cards, so I got to do a reading with you. If you didn't
Uh-huh.
have the cards present in the reading, would you still be able to deliver the same kind of reading? Do you think?
I don't think so. And and maybe that's just because the cards are my crutch. I get so much information from them. Have I ever really tried without the cards? No. I learned, I started with the tarot cards when I was 16 years old. So right around the time I first started finding my intuitive gifts. So I'm not really sure that I'm maybe giving myself a fair shake to say I totally depend on the cards, but I do depend on the cards. I think they're so full of symbolism, and I often compare them to dream analysis. And dreams, of course, are pictures as well. And I just really like it. That's what I'm drawn to. That's my medium. So while some psychics, you can walk into a room and they can just start telling you things, that doesn't feel like my natural talent. So maybe I can do it, but I'm going to go with what I know.
Do you think that the card deck itself has no intrinsic value really, other than what you pay for it?
Right, right.
Isn't it you that gives the value to the cards and to what they're going to tell you?
Somewhat. I mean, the pictures on the cards embody a lot of symbolism and a lot of knowledge over the ages. Within a single tarot card here, I've pulled up the devil, and we've got the devil is a card of ego and the material world, and we've got these people are chained to the devil, and it's number 15. It has a numerological value. It has a mythological value as far as Pan, or and some of the devilish connotations, Lucifer, of course. We have so much meat in these cards, and there's astrology put into the cards, there's mythology put into the cards, there's alchemy within the card symbolism. So they're packed with information, and I don't always use every bit of information in a reading. My intuition tells me which part to use.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But in my understanding of tarot, which also not my arena or forte, but I
Mhm.
understand that tarot cards come from Trifoni, right? Was like an Italian card game.
Tarocchi is the name that I've heard it by. I don't know about Trifoni. I'm not sure I've heard that term.
It was an Italian card game in the 1480s. I mean, my family is Italian, so
Oh, cool. Okay. I mean,
basically,
very possibly.
yeah.
Toroki is what I've heard. I've also heard it called Tarot. And then there's different inflections. So some people say tarot versus tarot. Um, but there are lots of branches of what first was called a game. And now keep in mind, in the 1400s, it was the time of the Crusades, and the Catholic Church was the government. And so if you went outside the Catholic faith, you could be risking your life, quite literally.
And your
And so
family's life.
the lore in the tarot cards is that all of this stuff is encoded and just presented as a game. That's the legend anyway.
So the
Whether we've
origins of tarot essentially are coming from card games, right?
I'm
Like
sorry, say that
original
again.
tarot card decks were meant for playing card games, not for psychic readings.
Some say that. Some say that. Some others believe that that the game was the cover for the important wisdom under.
Right, because if you were caught doing that during those times, you were getting the axe.
Exactly,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Well, that's really interesting. That's not something that I had read about it. And
Yeah, so tarot is loosely, I mean, really not so loosely, based on Kabbalah, and Kabbalah gets back into ancient Jewish mysticism. And if you and so that term gypsy today is considered a racial slur. Against It's considered anti-Semitic, in fact, because they kind of included the travelers, the Romani people, as that shunned population who were carrying these encoded, outside the Catholic realm, secrets, of mysticism.
well, since you brought that up, one of the things that I read about you is that you are a professional tarot card reader. So,
Yes.
what is that word professional? Like, what is that? How does that apply to this situation?
It means I get paid for what I do. I mean, like any professional. It's not a hobby. It's not even a part-time job. I mean, it is my full-time occupation. So I've been professional probably since graduate school, which was 2007. And when I was that was when I kept bringing my cards into my classes. I was getting my degree, my MFA in creative writing, poetry, and fiction, and I kept bringing my cards into my classes and involving my friends, and so then they would start to ask me to participate in class parties or to come in as a guest into other classes, and then it was like, will you do my wedding, and will you do my graduation, and will you do, and it just got to be like I had to start charging because it was taking too much of my time.
Right, right.
And that was the beginning of my professional career.
Well, also great to do something that you love and get paid for it. But
Sure.
at the same time, when I read professional tarot card reader, I mean, my side of the business is I'm in the crystal industry, so I get to meet everybody from all over the world, all different walks of life practices, and it's not uncommon that you run into which again is not a nice word I guess to use, but gypsies,
Mhm.
and I especially ones now that are like the astrology $10 psychic reading that turns into a
Right.
$20,000 empty your kids college fund reading, right?
Right, right.
So when I thought
The
professional,
cons,
I
the
was like,
grifts.
this is not a person who's trying to con anybody, who's not scamming
Right.
anybody, and who also is like legitimately understands the mechanics of what they're doing.
Yes.
Is that also apply to professional? Would you say?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. I mean, professional means you have a certain level of mastery. I would think, or it should mean that. I suppose I suppose people can hang up a shingle and declare anything, but yeah. I mean, as I said, I started reading when I was 16 years old. Next month I will be 61. So it's been a while, and I've learned a lot over the ages. And my feelings are, even though CBS calls me that St. Louis's #1 fortune teller, I kind of cringe a little bit. I mean, I realize that's a nice accolade, but that is that is like the Zoltar feeling, or
Right.
Madame Cleo, or and I'm just I would prefer to, many people call me more of like a life coach, or I'm showing you what you already know on a higher subconscious level, and together we can make a plan to either accentuate that or change that, to understand your energies and what you're doing right and what you're doing maybe, not in the way you would like it to be. I tend to not believe that we're doing anything wrong, because I think there are lessons in everything. I have a pretty varied background spiritually, and so all of the teachings that I've absorbed over these decades often go into my tarot cards. So I will see a lesson within a card, and I will share so that my clients have actual tools to use to make their life better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I do want to just go a little bit further into that understanding of. I feel like now, in the evolution of tarot reading over the course of time, has turned into something that I think a lot of people put negative connotation on. I
Mhm.
think like the layman, the average person who is maybe not going in the direction of open-minded spiritualism, but is very locked into religious narratives or things like that, are going to look at the practice of tarot reading or other kinds of readings, reading the coffee grinds or the coffee beans or dice or whatever other cigar smoke I know is another one. But I feel like why do you think it is that we've associated the tarot card reading and also Wicca, paganism, all of those things, even Kabbalah? I don't know if I was a Kabbalah teacher for 5 years.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I actually that was my primary focus of study was Kabbalah. And again, it's just like it's one of those things. Do you think that the religious narratives combat the more Wiccan and pagan agnostic narratives because they want control, or do you think that there's actually something legitimate there?
I what I've learned as a as a former humanities professor, excuse me, I've learned that we share so much in belief systems, and they may have different brands and different approaches of doing it, but there are some essential truths like oneness, like God is love, that they're just some really kind of core basic things. And so I don't think they have to combat. Now, when you get really into the organized religions, then they want to rule. Then they want to be the one, and with no other solution for God, to God, for God. And I think that's pretty close-minded. I mean, I've studied enough to really gain so much value. I've studied Buddhism and the Tao, and I grew up in the Episcopal Church, in the Christian faith. Yes, ordained minister, Ho'oponopono, getting into Hawaiian mysticism, Kabbalah, getting into ancient Jewish mysticism. So, I'm all over the board. I teach and practice A Course in Miracles. So very, and I find so much beauty in all of these faiths, and I enjoy meeting people and talking about their faiths and their practices, and sometimes I relate, sometimes I may borrow something, sometimes I'm thinking, yeah, that's not really my style, but good on you because you're finding peace, and and so I don't think it has to be conflicting, you know.
Do,
I think we can all live together.
do you think that there is value in absolute belief systems such as the church or Christianity, Judaism, Islam? Do you find that there's like actual value in absolutism? Because that's what those branches are.
Yeah, I think for some people need that. Some people need to just have a course with no diversion. This is what's right, for them anyway. And I'm okay. That does not bother me so long as they don't infringe on another person's rights, of course.
What
Uh,
was the point
but
of you being ordained as a minister?
well, that mainly was because some clients wanted to get married, and they asked me to do that. So,
Okay, so you wanted just the rights that came with that.
sure, sure. And yeah, and just to be their officiant and guide them on their new journey, from on the spiritual angle, and legal angle. So yeah, I mean, in my perfect world, legality should have nothing to do with spirituality, like that, the whole minister thing. I mean, ordained, anybody can be an ordained minister. Whether you're a good one, I suppose, whether you're a guide is a whole different story. But yeah, I don't think that rules are necessarily, strict rules, I should say, are necessarily a bad thing. I have met Wiccans and pagans who have very strict rules. Many people assume just because I have tarot cards that I'm Wiccan or pagan, and certainly I know of some of these things and have read, quite a bit about it, but that isn't the brand that calls me. Interestingly,
So what
I
was the group? But what was the group that originally kind of took tarot and brought it to the forefront? Was it the Romani?
What brought it to the forefront, I'd say it was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And they were the turn of the century, around 1900. And we're getting into Arthur E. Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, of course, designed the tarot deck with Arthur Waite. And, Aleister Crowley was a part of this. There was, just a group of influential mystics who took the Terra de Masai, and and the earlier decks, and they uh, molded it. They made it a little more in alignment with the Kabbalah tree of life, because they recognized the mystical value of Kabbalah, and they just loaded those pictures with symbolism that I think today is still the best deck that we have, really. I use a variation of it called the Universal Weight. I use this just about every day. I have many other tarot decks, but I think a Rider Waite based deck or Universal Weight, that's the way to go, because it's got everything you need to in alignment with Kabbalah.
So, from my understanding, each tarot card has a kind of generalized understanding around it. But then the person reading also has their own interpretation of what that card may be, right? So, like for
Yeah.
example, you could pull a card, and we could put 10 tarot readers, professional tarot readers, at a table, and each person maybe gives you a different interpretation of what that card means.
And some of it depends on the question. So I just, flipped my deck over here. And this card reminds me, when I was still learning, I've done a lot of cat rescue. And I had a situation that somebody had brought a tarot card reader, a much more experienced reader than I was at this time, so many decades ago now. And we were trying to figure out what was wrong with the cat. And she pulled this card, and this is the Eight of Swords. I'm sorry, the Eight of Wands. And she said one of his vertebrae was out of alignment, and she just read that as like kind of like the spinal vertebrae, and then look at that one kind of pulled in, and that was the initial impression she got. And what do you know? This cat had been x-rayed, and that was indeed the fact. So it was causing this cat some problems. And so that was just sort of a interesting moment that I learned as a tarot card reader. Oh, it doesn't have to have anything to do with the textbook meaning. And sometimes it's just what comes to you. Yeah, and that's the natural intuition. And when I started reading when I was 16, people say, "Well, how did you learn? Did you take classes? Did you?" There were no classes in the 1970s for this kind of thing. And but there were those little white booklets that come in the boxes. And those booklets are so vague. They have just a couple of word meanings for each card. But for me, that was enough to lean into my intuition, to pull this card and say, okay, the booklet might say movement or going forward, and that was enough. And I would spring on that in my mind and my intuition, and I learned to trust my intuition. And I learned as I got responses from others that I was quite good at it.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a story that I have around tarot cards. So when I first started getting into spiritualism, my path was so, I don't know, open. I was anything I could get my hands on. I was reading whatever I could get my hands on. I was exploring every avenue. I wasn't limited to any kind of belief system or thought. And it just so happened to be that I used to live in Manhattan, and in Manhattan, especially in the Village down by Christopher Street and St. Mark's, you have like all these really cool, quirky little stores, bookstores, things like that. And I remember walking through a bookstore, and I happened upon this tarot deck, and it looked vintage, like antique-ish. It looked old. I believe it was printed in the 50s, and I was like, wow, it's from it was like $5. And I bought the tarot deck and I brought it home and I started just like kind of going through it. I didn't know anything about reading it. It did have a little booklet in there that talked about the cards. And what I found really interesting was that the tower, this card, the tower, would just literally fall out of the deck on me. And it became like a little, for me, I started becoming uncomfortable. How, and I was like, there's like something behind this deck because there's no way the coincidences of that card were relevant. I'd be shuffling the deck and the card would just fly out of the deck. And it happened many times. I'd flip over the deck and that would be the card. And it was really crazy. And at some point I was like, I got a little worried. I threw the deck out. This is a this is a true story. I throw the deck out and I'm like, this is some voodoo shit. So I throw the deck out. A week later, I find the deck back in my desk drawer. True story. And I threw the deck in a dumpster, and a week later it was back in my drawer. And then I, ever since then, have associated tarot cards with something scary or even like. And I was wondering, do you have any like understanding around how something like that could even be possible? Is there things that attach themselves to these decks?
I mean, so I am probably the least superstitious tarot card reader you're ever going to meet. Like when I hear that story, I think, wow, maybe somebody knew they were yours and found them and put them in. I don't know. It is, I don't believe, I mean, I do believe that, yes, sometimes objects can carry bad energy. I do believe that. And we have some pretty good tales of that. You turn on the Discovery Channel around this time of year and you're going to see a lot of stories of, there's right here in Missouri where I am, there's a box up in northern Missouri. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was supposedly cursed by the gypsies in World War II when they were in their ghetto, before their execution by the Nazis, and they put this curse on this really quite beautiful cabinet, and supposedly everybody who owns this cabinet has, just horrible ending and what have you. I think things do resonate. So, maybe, that is very interesting. I mean, so the Tower card is the card of disaster or doom oftentimes. What was real funny about, well, not so funny, but funny, strange. Well, first of all, I had my own Tower card experience when I was in the corporate world in the early 2000s, and I had a business trip to Manhattan, and it was September 10th, 2001, and I was getting ready to get on my plane, and I said, how's my trip going to go? And I pulled the Tower card, and I thought, oh, shoot. Here we've got, I'm going to have a fight with my boss because there was a lot of tension between me and my boss. And of course, I got there, and the next day was September 11th, and that we watched the towers from our Midtown Manhattan thing. We watched them fall from our meeting room, and we were stranded there a few days. And I had no idea that the Tower card would actually mean the Twin Towers, and so that was my first Tower card story. But interestingly, in 2016. I got the Tower card all the time, and people were really riled up about the election then and Donald Trump getting in. And the thing about the Tower card, it says the foundation is wrong, the building has to come down, it's time to rebuild. It's a change maker. it's a card that doesn't play by the rules. And I find it so interesting. I always say, love him or hate him, Donald Trump is that. And how interesting that his symbol is the tower, right? So it's it kind of it's been amusing to me, and I'm I haven't done this year. People do ask me about what do you see in the election and that kind of thing, and that's not what tarot's for, and so I steer away from it in general. But I do think there's a place for that tower card when the current structure no longer serves. And so, like I said, love him or hate him, that was what he was about, breaking down the structure. And that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. And, and so it's interesting times we're in. And that tower card serves, I think we're still in a tower moment. Nobody knows what next year's going to look like. And so getting back to your thing, energies, objects can hold energies. There are some psychics who just work with, they'll hold a missing person's shoe or something like that, and they can feel things like that. So, if you had a particularly nasty person who had that deck, I could see, maybe something there.
So I guess more kind of going back, even still, I'm still trying to grasp what your interpretation is on. Do you think that the card deck itself houses some sort of consciousness or energy? Do you think that there is, like,
No,
people will say spirit or
mm-mm.
things like that? You think that
No,
literally the deck itself is just an extension of your own awareness and consciousness and helps you
it's
to
a
understand a
it's
story?
it's a tool to reflect awareness, but it doesn't house awareness. It doesn't have its own awareness.
So
I
any
do not believe.
person, I could take one of my employees here who has nothing to do with anything whatsoever, hand them a tarot card deck, and they could pull cards and legitimately produce a reading.
Absolutely. So in tarot life lessons, and I believe the second story, in alignment with the high priestess, there's a story I have of I was at a party and there's a drunk guy, and he's kind of playing with me, and he takes my cards and he says, "I'm going to give you a reading now." And this guy was smashed, and he did not know anything about the tarot. And he threw the tarot cards down, and he just sort of riffed off the pictures, and he actually gave me quite a good reading. And I believe it was just because he was totally open and he had no judgment. And it is not, it's less a spiritual thing and really quite psychological. But I like to say the psychological and the spiritual are united because we are one. And I can read your cards because we're connected just by being alive. And I call that life force God. So that's where the spirit part comes in, and how do the right cards show up? Maybe that's the spirit part as well. But for the most part, we're getting into psychology, and I'm just mirroring to you what you already know on a higher subconscious level, very much like dreams. And together we're interpreting it, and the cards help to do that. But in the same way, I can read your cards from a deck of playing cards. And many people do fortune telling from regular playing cards. They don't have to be this, the symbols are fantastic, but it doesn't, oh, look, here's our friend the tower right here. And they don't have to be an actual deck of tarot cards even. So that's where the intuition, the people connection, all of this comes into play.
Yeah, so I have another question. So the other night when I did the reading with you,
Mhm.
you had kind of laid out what the year was going to look like, going my year ahead of me, right, was going to look
Yeah.
like to some degree. So in that, do you think that it is actually possible to predict or understand the future? Because there's two schools of thought. I mean, if we're based off of free will, and we have the ability to make our own choices and influence our future, then is it counterintuitive that the future kind of has something coming down the pipeline for us?
So what I told you when I put your cards down was I'm showing you the path you're on now if you don't do anything differently. So you have an idea of your trajectory, of what you're attracting, of who you're living and working with, and all of these situations. Your higher self is more aware than your conscious self. And that's what I'm tuning into to show you. So if we see something coming up that you don't like, that's an opportunity to do it differently. So I always tell my clients, I'll never tell you you're doomed. I don't believe in this terrible fate thing. I mean, sometimes we know something's going to happen that we can't change. I read for someone yesterday, and she saw her mother was like in her last year of life. And I should say we saw. And we knew this, her mother is elderly. She hasn't been well, she's approaching 90, she's in a nursing home. Like this stuff happens. And so her higher self was aware of it, even though her conscious self was kind of in denial and kind of didn't want to go there yet. In general, tarot is not meant to, just to put a disclaimer out there, like I'll never tell somebody when they're going to die, like the person questioning me. That's not for anybody to know. And I wouldn't see that unless this person had, let's say, terminal cancer and knew that their own death was impending and was maybe being very conscious about how to prepare for that, for instance, or maybe to heal some relationships before they passed. Tarot can be helpful to kind of give some ideas about things like that. But there's never going to be a, Chris, I see you're ending, in 5 years on July 7th,
Yeah.
no way. It's garbage. Yeah.
Well, I guess this now brings us back to the concept of the modern day psychic, or the modern day person who is out there with the sign outside, $5 tarot reading, come on in. What do you think that there's some legitimacy to that, even though there's largely based around it, the idea of conning or scamming or all of these things? Because I get to run into a lot of people like this, and it's interesting when you see them outside of that environment, outside of their little shop, and they're in the reality of things, and you're like, there's no way this person is here trying to help anybody, right? And but their whole gig is that. So do you think that that's there in a legitimate way on any form? And I'm not trying to get you to call out anybody. I'm just saying, I feel like that's become the standard and the norm, especially nowadays, where the people that you do run into on the streets, or like the little shops on the streets that are doing tarot card readings, typically are not being ethical about much of anything. Is that true?
I think every reader is different, just as every person is different. And you're going to have your unethical ones, and you're going to have your great ones. And oftentimes, I mean, I've done countless parties. For 5 or 6 years, I was the tarot card reader at the St. Louis Renaissance Fair. Like some of these kind of cheesy things. Some people, on some of the hot parties, I generally have on my website that I don't dress up. Like sometimes they want you to look all mystical and stuff. In general, I don't do that because I just think that shtick, and I'm for real, and I'm, not, don't need the theater. But on Halloween, I'll do it sometimes, just to keep in the spirit of the party. So you can get a very good reading in a circumstance like that. I have I've been asked.
I think
What was that?
I think my question is do you think that there's a line or a boundary where it's like, okay, so the common narrative there is that you go for the tarot reading, it's a $10 tarot reading. All of a sudden, the person reading your cards is going to say something like, "I see a negative entity around you. There's a curse on you. This impending doom is right around the corner. I can remove it. I can do this. All I got to do is just light this candle, put you in this like rose hip bath water, take this crystal, like all of those things. You need to pay me $5,000."
Right. Well, that's obviously a con, and to me that's so beyond. A tarot card reading is about consciousness. It's about awareness. It's about waking up to what you're doing, where your energies are going, and that's all a tarot card reading is. So if somebody gets into lifting curses, which I think are usually garbage. And I have people occasionally call me. I just tweeted about this. I have people often say either will I put a curse or a blessing on someone, and will I take a curse or even take a blessing off of someone if they think they're a bad person who's blessed, And I'm like, that's not my game. Um, I do think it's a game. As I said, I am a practitioner of A Course in Miracles, and A Course in Miracles is very Buddhist in alignment that this world is illusion. And yes, illusion can be manipulated, which is what magic is. But miracles are of a higher level. That's of the spirit, of the soul. So that's where I want to put my energy. I don't play with manipulating circumstances, and that's not where reality is. And yeah, so anything you're talking about with adding money when it becomes more than a reading, definitely run from that. I
So
would
and
recommend.
also that's not something you ever do. You never say to somebody,
Never.
"Hey, I'm seeing something in your cards here. I can handle it for you."
No, never. The closest I would get to that is I have had people bothered by spirits or entities, whatever you want to say, in their homes, and I have gone to their homes to do cleansings, sometimes for free, and and that's been interesting, but yeah, this is not putting a curse on somebody, that I always say, if
Can
you
is that a
believe,
thing?
well, anything is possible if you believe it to be possible. So, I was talking to someone recently about Ouija boards, and I've done Ouija boards numerous times with people who are so-called experts at it. And they're just, they have these great, amazing, astounding experiences and what have you. And I've participated. And, Chris, they never work for me. Never. And I finally got clear on why. And it's because I'm in the light, and I only will attach to what's love and light. And I'm not open to just any energies. And Ouija boards are any energies. So, my joke is the Ouija board doesn't believe in me because it just doesn't touch me. And so getting into curses, if you believe you're cursed, if you really, take that to heart, then you are, because you've co-created it. And so we are, I believe that I can read your cards because we're connected just by being alive. I call that life force God. I don't tell people how to do God or what to call God. That's your business. But if you can go there, then you're hooked into that God system, as we all are, just by being alive here. But most people don't own it, you know? And so if you don't believe in your own God power, and and some crazy person down the street says they've put a curse on you, and then, oh, look, you got hit by a car the next day in a fender bender or whatever, and they're like, it has begun. And then they look for every negative thing, and they believe that it's growing and this curse is having power. And, it's kind of like the downward spiral thing. And I like to say we can have upward spirals too, by the way. It's just what we put our mind on grows. We're growing energy, we're paying attention to that, and we're creating more of that, good or bad.
Yeah. I have to go a little, just a tiny bit off topic from tarot because
Mhm.
one of the things in doing research about you that I found extremely interesting was that you've spent over a decade interpreting the works of Sylvia Plath. Uh,
Yeah.
Basically, Sylvia Plath was a confessional poet,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Well, that's what she's known as. Yeah. Actually, over 2 decades now. Yeah, it's been over 20 years,
Wow.
and and she is known most famously for her confessional poetry and her depression and her suicide. And it's my
And
purpose in life.
Pulitzer Prize after her death.
Correct. She didn't get to enjoy that, unfortunately. It's my purpose in life, I believe, to redeem her, and to show that she was so much more than
What's
just
the
this
connection?
depressed poet. What's that?
What's the connection? Like, why Sylvia Plath? Like, what is your connection there? Like, how did you get to that?
So, I mean, I first started reading Plath, interestingly, about the same year that I found my tarot, and really some of my psychic abilities. Um, but I can't say that I was like obsessed with her or anything. But I picked up the bell jar and I got kind of interested in her poems. And as I got older and I went to college and later grad school, and it was in graduate school, back then in my 40s, where I saw the tarot card imagery, most obviously in her poem Daddy, where she says, and my tarot pack, and my tarot pack. And I realized tarot was another name for tarot. And she was going on, she talks about her gypsy ancestress and her weird luck. And if you read anything of her writings, she was quite spiritual. She was quite mystical. And they practiced on Ouija boards all the time. And Ted, her husband, was an astrologer. And so I started to put all this stuff together. And then I began to look at her work with this lens, and I realized, holy smoke, everyone was missing all this brilliant stuff she was doing. She took one poem and she could make it work on 6 different levels. And she did this over 40 times in her collection Ariel. And I mean, it's astounding. She was a genius's genius, but everyone holds her to that depressive confessional poet label. So my latest book, The Occult Sylvia Plath, this is actually her on the cover with her own crystal ball, by the way. And she practiced bibliomancy, and she had these witchy bonfires and rituals, and her husband's been widely studied for his Kabbalah and his alchemy and his Kundalini yoga and all of the stuff that he was teaching Sylvia. And they wrote about it. They talked about it, the hypnosis and the, even, levitation dreams and all of this fascinating stuff. And yet the academics are largely atheist. And Plath called herself an atheist, which is interesting because most people agree she was the most spiritual atheist ever. But, atheism doesn't deny spirituality. It just denies God as a figurehead in the clouds on a throne. And so she was fascinated by this other side, by seeing if she could contact her dead father, by all of these influences channeling. She wanted to be like W.B. Yeats and his wife Georgie, and channel and do automatic writing, and she wanted to be as great as Yeats with her husband Ted. And they wrote about this stuff widely, but no one kind of took it seriously or put it together. So that's what my book, The Occult Sylvia Plath, is doing. Some people have I read some reviews, which a writer should never do, but some people are like, well, it's nothing new, if you've read Plath's stuff. And it's like, that's correct. I wasn't making anything up. I wanted to show the context of it. I wanted people to see how a mystic works and thinks, and especially a creative mystic. And I'm lucky enough to be both of those as a writer myself and a poet myself. So I think that all of these academics, they teach Plath, but they don't understand creativity, and they sure as hell don't understand mysticism. And so you had to maybe be both a Plath scholar and a tarot scholar to see what I saw. And for whatever reason, Sylvia picked me to do the job.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting correlation, and the fact that you connected so deeply to that. It's very niche. It's not something you would commonly hear, and it's noteworthy
Yeah.
in my opinion. I had a question for you to wrap kind of the end of this up to some degree. When you did my card reading, you pulled 7 cards, and you called it a formation. What was the name of the formation?
I believe I did the horseshoe spread for you.
Right, which was 7 cards, correct?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
When you watch movies or shows or things like that, typically you see like 3 cards which represent past, present, and future. Right?
Mhm.
That's a pretty standard thing?
Can be done, sure. Uh-huh.
Is it possible you could just pull us 3 cards and kind of break down what each card means so people can kind of see and understand how the interpretation of the card might happen?
Sure, sure. I mean, is there a question that I'm pulling for, or a person, or I'm like I
Yeah,
mean,
you
I
could do it for me if you want.
Okay, so I'll do it for you.
And you know, when
And
I spoke to you the other night, I told you I have no like, quite. I'm like I'm open to hearing
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. So maybe do you want to do it on your show, around your show, your podcast?
Sure.
So all right, all right. So
What was that card that just flew out?
oh, I actually sort of dropped a bunch of them, so that was just my clumsiness. Again, like I said, I am the least superstitious tarot card reader
Okay.
you're ever going to
So
meet.
just because a card pops out, that doesn't mean much to you.
It can. I mean, if it really sort of screams attention, that was probably, see right there, like this is probably 10 cards, and it's just I'm a bad shuffler is what it is. I've been reading over 45 years and I still don't
You
shuffle
still a
well.
bad shuffler.
So the bottom card on the deck is something that I often look at as well. And this, in regard to your question, is about being at service. So, this person is giving to the less fortunate here. Um, this is an initiative of love for you, and just how can I help?
Yeah, I feel like, at this stage in my life, I've been very fortunate that I've generated a lot of success. I've done a lot of good. I really don't have much of an agenda in any which way, shape, or form other than to just fulfill some sort of purpose or figure out what that is and how do I execute the purpose. Because I do feel like I have that muscle where I am able to do what is needed, not what is wanted.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
usually that results in difficulty and fighting and pushback. And it's interesting because the original reading you did for me involved a lot of that narrative where it's like nothing is ever easy. Everything is kind of
Yeah, right, right. I remember that. Yeah.
nothing is
Yeah.
ever easy. It's always a struggle. There's little payoff in the end, and that is a very very common narrative around my life. Around my life, but I don't think it's because of bad luck or anything like that. I think it's because
No.
I am always willing to do the hard thing. I'm willing to
Mhm.
walk the path that no one else wants to walk. I'm willing to make the hard decisions that no one else wants to make. And that is my life. And so I'm very familiar with that path, and I'm very familiar with the understanding that if you're going to do what's needed in life or you're going to do the right thing in life, there's nothing easy about it.
And I would add to that, that you as a co-creator of your life have a belief that that's what you need to do. And so while some people have it easier, your belief is, maybe this will make you better. Maybe this will make you rise above, sometimes what our ancestors were or something like that. We take on our struggles and our challenges, not always consciously. We don't want them consciously, but subconsciously, there's some sort of need, that you have to fulfill there. And like I said, maybe just to rise above it, maybe just a belief, that it's always hard because that's how you were raised, and I
You
mean,
are
we do
not the
that too.
first person to say that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So again,
Yeah.
many years of being in this and having many friends who are psychics and astrology readers, tarot. It's a very common narrative what you're saying right now by people I respect and trust have told me that uh, maybe I'm choosing and making it harder than it has to be.
Mhm.
So that's a very common narrative in my life.
And me too. I mean, as like you said, I mean, the first reaction when you hear, "Oh, she's a professional tarot card reader," like, I have to have a thick skin because they're going to mock me. I mean, especially in academia, they have iced me out in conferences, and I get made fun of regularly. I mean, I do some of these appearances, and then sometimes I'll just get, a bunch of emails that are from usually some sort of academic who's being all smarmy and trying to take me down a notch for whatever reason, and you just get used to it, honestly. There's going to be trolls everywhere.
Yeah, there's no shortage of that. I mean, and again, that's kind of my point that I was making is that there's two directions you can go in. You can go in the productive direction, one where you're not involving yourself in the nonsense and the minutia of life, which is where everyone else kind of likes to reside. And I'm not saying everyone else, but especially in this day and age,
Mhm.
the position that most people want to take is on the sidelines throwing their tomatoes. And then there's
Yeah.
very few of us on the field actually really playing the game. And while we're getting tomatoes thrown at us and having to understand that, okay, these people who are throwing these tomatoes, this can't, number one, deter me from what I'm here to do. I'm actually here playing the game. And
Mhm.
just because there's not a lot of me on the field right now doesn't mean that I get to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to go the easy route too. And I think
Right.
that's kind of what you were saying as well, is that, you know, we're in this world to, one, do what we need to do, not what we want to do. What we want to do is always going to be the most comfortable and convenient thing, and
There's no
that's,
growth.
and is that ever like, I guess that's a good question for you. Do you believe that comfort and convenience equates to the right thing?
Um, nothing worthwhile, it comes without some challenge. And so, if comfort and convenience is just, sitting around watching cartoons and eating, like you're not going to create anything with that.
Do you believe we're here to
I
create something? Like, what's the purpose, our purpose in this world?
Yeah, I mean, we all have different purposes, of course. Like I told you, I truly believe like my purpose, aside from helping a lot of people, which any number of my clients may even say that my purpose is to work with them because I've helped them. But I think one of my higher purposes, and I have many, I had two children and I have a husband, and but one of my higher purposes is to redeem Sylvia Plath and her reputation. And I feel like I have absolutely been called to do this, and I have a lot of evidence to support that, down to owning an object that she hand carved, a hermetic caduceus that literally almost fell into my lap, that I wasn't even trying to own. And it's basically like a magic wand that she had carved out of wood. And how I came to own this precious object, I mean, it's amazing to me. And I feel like, yeah, and I feel like these things are all nudges that, yes, keep doing what you're doing. You're on the right path. And and we all get those nudges. It shouldn't all be a fight. We know when we have joy, when joy leads us, when we have excitement and enthusiasm on our work, that that's where we're meant to be, regardless of what the external circumstances are looking like in the moment. If you're led by joy, keep doing it. You
Yeah.
know, and so
I have
that's
a couple
that's
minutes left with you. Yeah.
yes, uh-huh,
So something that just popping into my head is one of the cards that you showed me was the Ten of Swords, I believe.
uh-huh,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Like, that is super freaking scary card. Like, it, like again, going back, what, I don't know if you noticed this, but in the church, and I just associated the two. Like, a lot of Catholic churches, right? When you go into them, it's dark, it's scary. There's a lot of carvings and sculptures of things that that look like that. There's a lot of blood and crucifixion and suffering and pain. And a couple, like, a lot of the cards in the tarot deck really produce that kind of same feeling for me, where it's like you see a card like that and you're like, oh shit, I'm super screwed.
Yeah.
This guy's got 10 swords in his back. Um,
So let me talk about that. I mean, as I'm skimming through the deck right now because I want to show you a couple other examples of sword cards. So swords can look very scary and people think of actual death. But swords in the tarot are our thoughts. We say someone is sharp, right? So these are basically his thoughts have destroyed him. Isn't that interesting? And that was your example of it. So if I look at the Nine of Swords, also a very scary card, she is turned away from her thoughts. None of these thoughts are attacking her, right? Her world is fine. She's cozy in bed. She even has a comforter here, right? So this is a card basically of denial. Then the Eight of Swords is the lady in the cage, and people see this and they get scared. But keeping in mind, these are thoughts. She's blindfolded, she's tied up. She does not see the door is open. She could actually walk out at any time. It's a cage of her belief system. So you have to really understand what these symbols mean before you just jump into, oh my God, I'm going to be murdered. That's not the case. But you might be killing yourself with your own thoughts, you know, and or making your life extremely hard, even to the point of killing a project or something. So that's how it works. Other symbols. We have the wands. The wands are different. The wands are enthusiastic and their energy. And so this person is carrying a load of responsibility, but he's doing it energetically. And this way it would be too heavy of a load. And then we talked about the pentacles being the gold coin and the money and career and things of the world. And what did we miss? And then we have the cups, and cups are love and emotion. So this is the Queen of Cups, and this is the Knight of Cups. And so these are extending love in different ways, and showing emotion. And so we have suits, just like a regular deck of
Yeah.
playing cards, that have all of that.
But I guess what that kind of like leads me into is just I guess a basic question around um, why is it that you're doing cards upside? Like, 'cause I know that there's two schools of thought where some people don't believe in upside down cards.
Right, the reversals. Yeah, to me, that's a huge waste of potential information. You can't look at everything. I mean, you could, I suppose, but I don't look at everything as only rosy. Every card has its other darker aspects
How many cards
sometimes.
are in the deck?
There's 78 cards in the tarot deck.
78. So essentially, what you're looking at is 156 cards if you're reading it up and down.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you're adding an extra 78 interpretations to your deck, which is
Yes,
a lot.
correct. And then the way you lay them out also affects the reading. And then, as we said, sometimes it has nothing to do with the meaning of the card, but then it's just what the card is telling you in that moment,
Right, like
by
the
how it
cat
looks.
with the
Uh-huh.
wands and
Exactly.
right. Yeah, super
Exactly.
interesting. I got a couple rapid fire questions for you real quick, and then I'll
Right.
let you go. What is your favorite book
Ever?
ever? Like
It,
you could take one book
it
with
would
you.
be it would be Ariel by Sylvia Plath.
Yeah, actually, really, really, really great. If anyone hasn't read that, I mean, it's very. If there's a lot of books in the world, that's a pretty good one. But
Yeah.
it's a compilation of shorts and poems and
It's all poetry in Ariel. Yeah.
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 Do
And
you,
it is the finest example of her mysticism.
yeah, it's really really a great read and not that hard of a read to get through.
Yeah.
If you had one piece of advice to just give out to a stranger who walks up to you, what would be one piece of advice you'd give out?
I think it would be that we're all intuitive, and that the difference between the regular person and the psychic is that the psychic is looking for it, looking to build it, paying attention, and not doubting it. Doubt is the biggest enemy of intuition.
Yeah, if you
Just being afraid to be wrong, attaching your ego to it.
if you had one prayer that you could pray, what would it be?
Oh, it would be for peace, of course, world peace, getting back to oneness. We would not be killing each other and hating each other if we understood we were all part of the same body,
Yeah,
you know?
very counterintuitive what's going on nowadays. I don't know what the right word is here, but I feel like you really have a good viewpoint, like a bird's eye view of kind of what's going on in the world and the transition that we're currently in, where there's such a huge generational gap now
Yeah.
between people who grew up like even me. I grew up in the 90s in the early 2000s, and what I'm seeing now from the younger generations that are coming up, like the teenagers, the difference in morality, understanding, perception,
Right.
consciousness, everything is so vastly wide. I
Right.
don't know why this guy just bring it. Do you have to run?
No, no,
Okay.
I'm okay.
So yes, Yom Kippur was just 2 days ago,
Uh-huh.
and I was fasting for Yom Kippur. Also, a bunch of things are going on, and in the process of that, I'm driving, and I'm trying to kind of just like kill a little bit of time. And as I'm driving, there's this young kid driving in a car, and he's coming really, really fast around the corner. I'm at a stop sign, and he almost like kind of hits me, but I'm turning. I'm now turning, and he stops a young kid, like I don't know, like 18, 19-year-old kid, and he's like, maybe you should learn how to turn better. And I'm like, oh, you're really tough, right? Like you're a real tough guy. And he's like, yeah, I am tough, fuck you. And then he drives away really fast, right?
Uh-huh.
Like back in my day, we're both stopping the car and we're going to address the problem like men,
Right.
not
Yeah.
you curse at me and then speed off.
Right.
And I was like, this is just such a perfect example of where we are.
Yeah.
Virtually
Hotheads.
speaking, like, right, like the trolls you were talking about, like how people come and just say nasty things and there's no repercussion for them. And
Right.
I think that this is really a damaging thing for us is Google reviews.
Mm.
The power that we give people, especially the modern day Karen, if you will, right?
Uh-huh.
The person who gets to go and try to destroy you and your reputation because
Yeah.
they don't feel like because of entitlement, most likely.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Do you think there's a way
Yeah.
around that?
Yeah. I mean, uh, all I do, I start every day and I just ask God to let me be a source of love and light. And I know that every negative behavior is actually coming out of pain and fear and insecurity. And it can be very hard when those negative behaviors are directed at you. But I try to step back and look at it like a toddler having a tantrum, you know, and in the same way that a good parent anyway, does love that toddler, even if they're completely doing the meltdown on the floor. Um, they may scoop them up and put them somewhere else, or remove themselves from for a little while. But but to beat that child senseless is no kind of solution, right? And that's true for us with all people in the world. So I just try to look at every person with love and compassion, and understand that they have their stuff that they're going through, and I don't know that necessarily, and I'll just try to be a model.
With your experience in life and your perspective, do you think like what do you think the value is the people who have the basket of tomatoes and are
Mhm.
slinging? Why do you think that that's the direction they decide to go in,
It gives them a teeny bit of power, or it makes them feel powerful, if they can hurt,
as
if they
opposed to
as opposed to doing something, as
themselves?
opposed to creating. They want to tear down instead of create. Yeah.
Do you think that comes from laziness?
Possibly part of what I think it really comes from is fear. A Course in Miracles here, which I study, it says there are only two things: love and fear. And it says, and fear does not exist, interestingly. But people believe in fear, and they let fear rule them, and so they don't believe they're enough. Why does a robber rob a bank? Like, he doesn't believe that he could do it honestly. He doesn't believe that he's enough to make a decent living and be a positive contribution. So he's got to and he gets this chip on his shoulder, and he'll make all his judgments and excuses for why he robs the bank. But it all comes down to, like, fear and insecurity and pain, and every negative behavior, everything starts with that. And that's why we have to look at every human being with compassion.
Right.
We don't have to like what they did. A murderer still needs to go to jail. A rapist still needs to go to jail. I still condemn their actions, but it all comes from a place of pain.
Last question.
Yep.
This whole thing that's been going on over the course of time started with Epstein, the Epstein Island. Now you have Puff Daddy or whatever his Diddy, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Also, all those children that just disappeared in Hawaii. And we
Right.
just don't talk about that at all anymore. It came in and was like, hey, there's a bunch of kids missing. Scratch that, right? What do you think is up with
Yeah.
that?
Well, I think our entertainment industry is very corrupt, and I think it's hand in hand with our political machine. And and I know that that's enough for me to say right there that some people are going to be screaming at me and hating me for it. I was talking to my sister, and she said, and I told her how upset I was. I don't know if you've seen these Justin Bieber interviews that have come out. Now, I'm somebody, I never paid any attention to Justin Bieber. He was a boy, he was a little boy. I knew he was famous, I knew he was cute. That was about all I knew about him. And I saw his interviews about what had happened to him at P. Diddy's parties. And I, as a mother of two sons, I became so saddened. I mean, I think it kept me up for like 2 nights in a row, just mourning, just grieving for this poor young man. And I said something to my sister about it, and she said, well, where are you hearing that? And I said, Twitter. I saw it. I've seen the interviews. I've seen, and she immediately dismissed that. Well, that's Elon Musk's platform, and so you can't believe anything there. And I said, well, that's the one with the voice that anybody can put stuff on. And she's like, well, that's why you don't believe it. And I'm like, no,
It's the
like
opposite, actually.
it's the opposite. But people want their curated, controlled message today, and
Biased messages.
very it's very odd to me, like that you wouldn't want all the options and you wouldn't want to see everything. And but I don't know, maybe this world is just too much.
Yeah. Well, Julia, I love the conversation. I could talk to you for hours, I feel.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and your schedule. I owe you a nice crystal. So get me your shipping address so I can send you a really nice crystal. I'd love to run this back with you again in the future. Less about tarot, but thank you so much for your insight, your wisdom. I really recommend it. If somebody wants to do a reading with you, the best way to do that, I found on your website.
Yeah. Just write me through the website, juliagordonbramer.com.
Yeah.
And my phone number's there, my email's there, all of that. So yeah.
One of the last thing I'd say about you is that we need more people who are not afraid to say their truth. And not in a weird way where people are like, I'm speaking my truth, but in a way where you're not afraid to be honest about how you feel and how you think in a world where you're persecuted for it.
Right. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
speak your truth. Ciao, my girl.
All right.
Thank you,
Thanks
dear. Bye.